Okay, I'm going to read some more selections from Richard's work, and this particular work was written in Cape Breton, where he used to spend the summers with his ex-wife Tina. She had a cottage there, and it was a very idyllic spot. Richard enjoyed it very much, and it was a real inspiration to his writing. But at the same time, he managed to maintain the same sort of sensibility, the sensibility that I like so much in his work, of being very unsentimental about nature and using remarkably original metaphor in terms of the way he described things. So I'm going to read a few passages and then I'm going to contextualize it a little bit. I posted a video just the day before about the whole Concordia thing. And I'd like to return to that because there's a connection for Richard's work in terms of all that. Okay, now the first one is from a work called Cape Breton Haiku. And seagulls rise and curse, and the wind slings, fierce wind that plays with the dense coils and springs of my beard, wind that stuffs my mouth like a rag, rooting wind. Whiny imprints of my toes in the sand cluster, overlap in cells. Honeycombs, my shoes are lumpy with sand's beigey terminal sibilance. Hands slimed with sunscreen. Beach, a butcher's counter, a morgue slab. Okay, now the next one, number 2, is written at night. Wet laundry hangs from the improvised clothesline strung across the bedroom, and during the night I wake up and, in dazed clamor of sleep, mistake the nightgowns, towels, for people standing about. A jury or witnesses. Night's a hood, a mask, the neighbors' houses glowing, a crystal skull through the trees. At night, staggering through the dark to pee, the air is busy, swarmy, ravaged with an imagined malice. Fear, a dead telephone at the ear. I smack the nub of the switch and the room screams into existence, my arms up in front of my eyes as though before a vision of God. Number 3. Summer mornings, skies a glowing bucket, a blue so far, so vertiginous, it could be mere feet away. We sit on the deck, drink coffee color of the Sphinx, as we mull over the night's dreams. Allow the sun to gently raise them to nothingness. The black flies swarming about our heads, Captain Nemo-ish divers' helmets. And after our coffee, we walk past the garden, the earth-barren, gray, elongated mounds like loaves or bunkers, to the top of the hill, the telephone poles along the road as pale as naked men to look out on the sea. Beneath, sky blue of Hindu gods blinds man conception of the sea. Sea littered with miniature studs, brilliant scraps. Sea, an inconceivably enormous mirror hurled down with ferocious force ad infinitum. Okay, now, so those are 3 passages that are quite typical of his work. Now, when he was sick with his drinking, he applied to the creative writing program at Concordia. This was my mom's idea. The basic concept was he needed something to motivate him to feel hopeful about. He was rejected, which surprised people. My mom had some connections at Concordia. She had gone through the program during the 1980s, and she had taught there for a while. So there was that whole thing, that whole connection thing, which maybe shouldn't exist, but that didn't really count for much anyway. However, what I'd like to focus on is simply the caliber of his writing. And as people know, these days, cultural institutions, and Canada is very bad in this regard, have gotten rid of transparency, even though largely their funding comes from taxpayer money. They've got rid of transparency, and they respond in form letterese. One never really knows why one is rejected. And as Mark Spry mentioned briefly, and as I've said before, this is a point that really needs more discussion. There's a mediocrity problem in Canadian letters. This is something that I used to talk to my brother a lot about, and I've talked with other writers about this at length. Canadian writing doesn't really have that great an international reputation. Steve Hennigan made the point several years ago that there's a certain kind of rah-rah school of discourse that claims that Canadian literature has become is sort of a triumph and internationally celebrated. And this was before Alice Munro won her Nobel and before Atwood became hugely successful with the film adaptation, the TV film adaptation of The Handmaid's Tale. So even with those great successes, I can tell you from personal experience that Canadian letters really does not have that great a profile. These projects, like the kind Atwood are working on, are probably a step in the right direction. I talked with another friend of mine recently, Jason, about the need to sort of integrate these narratives that we have, the more successful novels, and integrate them into movie forms, TV forms, graphic novel forms, etc. But there's a lot of resistance to that among Canadian institutions. There's a lot of resistance to that among Canadian-owned publishing houses who are very conservative, who just want to put out rather highly priced books that are print only, that don't have illustrations, that don't have great covers, and so forth. Now, all that would be fine if the quality of the writing was outstanding, but the problem is it isn't. And that goes back to the way these writing programs operate, the way the small presses operate. There's a much too chummy sort of quality to them, and on top of that you have people in positions of power who simply have bad taste. They have bad taste and they prefer mediocre work to good work. They do want a pecking order, and they don't want to feel threatened by people who are more talented than they are, and that's not healthy for any of us. So I hope that the discussion over what's wrong at Concordia will continue in terms of the harassment that female students have had to put up with, but I hope that it will also expand and deal with these other issues of quality, issues of bullying that's not necessarily sexual in nature, issues of cliquishness, issues of favoritism, issues of instructors who are just lazy. And I hope it will look at other writing programs, other publishing houses. I hope the whole AIM-CAN-LIT system will get a serious vetting, a serious going over, because it needs it. It really needs it.